She loved him more than her own heartbeat until the day he said those words that shattered her world. Darling, you need to have an abortion and go back to work. But life has a strange way of turning pain into power, of turning tears into storms, and of giving revenge the sweetest taste when no one expects it. Subscribe now to this channel for more heart-stopping stories that will shake your soul and make you believe in miracles again. The rain was falling hard against the city windows the night he spoke those cruel words, his voice calm, his eyes cold, his tone almost rehearsed. Darling, you need to have an abortion and go back to work. My hands trembled on the cup of tea. The warmth burned my skin, but I could not feel anything anymore. I looked at him, the man I had loved for 6 years, the man who had once written me poems and promised to protect my smile forever. And I saw stranger in his face. The doctor had said the baby was healthy, the heartbeat strong, and yet my husband, Mark, said it was a mistake, a distraction from his plans. He was rising fast in the company, and my pregnancy didn't fit his schedule. He wanted perfection, a flawless life that looked good on paper, and I was ruining it. I tried to speak, to tell him how much I had dreamed of this child, how many nights I had prayed for this miracle after losing my first baby 2 years ago, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. He turned away, checked his watch, and muttered that he had a meeting. I watched the door close behind him, and I felt a silence so heavy it crushed my lungs. That night I packed my suitcase, not because I had decided to leave, but because something deep inside me told me that I was about to lose everything, yet not forever. I moved into a small apartment near the hospital where I worked as a nurse. It wasn't much, but it was safe and quiet. I stopped answering Mark's calls. I stopped checking the photos of us smiling in Paris. I deleted them all. The first few weeks were hard. I cried myself to sleep, whispering to the tiny life inside me that we would be okay, but the world had sharper edges than I remembered. One morning, a letter arrived from Mark's lawyer requesting my signature on divorce papers and a clause that said I would never claim support. I almost tore it up, but something inside me said no, let him think he's one. I will sign, and I will wait. I gave birth alone 3 months later during a storm. The city lights flickering like dying stars. The nurse placed my baby girl in my arms, and when I saw her eyes, I felt something powerful rise inside me. Not fear, not weakness, but purpose. I named her Grace because she was proof that love could survive betrayal. Years passed. I worked long nights. I raised Grace with stories about strength, not sadness. Every time I looked at her, I remembered that Mark had wanted her erased from existence, and I swore silently that one day he would regret every word he ever said. Fate loves irony. It was 5 years later when I saw his name again on a hospital chart. Mark Harrison, patient, admitted to cardiac care, severe complications. I froze when I read it. My heart thundered in my chest, and I almost laughed at the cruel twist of destiny. He had become the CEO of the hospital's main sponsor, and now he was lying in my ward, helpless. Under my watch, I walked into the room wearing my mask and gloves. He didn't recognize me at first. His hair was grayer, his eyes hollowed by regret, or maybe ambition that had burned too bright. I introduced myself professionally, and he smiled faintly, saying he was glad to see a kind nurse. I stayed silent as I adjusted his IV line. He didn't know that the woman who had once begged for love now held his life in her hands. That night, as I watched him sleeping, I remembered the letter, the betrayal. Days turned into weeks. I treated him like every other patient, but inside me storms raged. He spoke often about his regrets, the wife he had lost, the child he had never met. He said he had been young, stupid, chasing success instead of happiness. I wanted to scream that the child was alive, that she was more beautiful than anything he had ever owned, but I stayed quiet. I Wanted to see if his remorse was real one night. He had a severe attack, the alarms blared, the doctors rushed in, and for a moment his eyes locked with mine. He whispered my name, and at the first froze. He remembered me. I ordered the team to stabilize him, and we saved his life. His tears rolled down as he said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me." But it was too late for forgiveness. I told him to rest and left the room shaking. That night, I went home and looked at Grace, sleeping peaceful and radiant, and I realized that my revenge wasn't to hurt him. My revenge was to make him face the truth that he had tried to destroy something pure, and now that purity was the only thing that could save him. When the hospital board discovered that the CEO's ex-wife had been his nurse, they transferred me temporarily to another unit. But before I left, I visited him one last time. He looked weaker, his breath shallow, but his eyes softer than I remembered. He asked about our daughter, and for the first time I told him she existed, that she was alive and kind and strong. He cried uncontrollably, begging to see her. I told him maybe someday when she was ready. He tried to hold my hand, but I stepped back. I told him I had forgiven him, not for him but for myself, because carrying hate was like drinking poison every day. He nodded, slowly saying he didn't deserve Grace, and I whispered, "Neither did I, but life gave her to me anyway." When I turned to leave, he said something that froze my soul. He said, "Anna, I left everything in my will for you and for her, and if I don't make it, promise me you'll tell her that her father finally understood love." I walked out without answering, because I didn't know if I could ever tell her that. 3 months later, he was gone. I stood at his funeral under a gray sky, holding Grace's hand. She didn't know the truth yet. She only knew that the man in the casket had helped many people. I watched his casket lower into the earth and felt the final weight of the past fall from my shoulders. That night I sat in our small living room with the box his lawyer had sent. Inside was a letter written in his shaky handwriting. He wrote that he had seen my eyes in the hospital and realized he had never stopped loving me, that his cruelty had been fear, that success had blinded him, and that Grace was his redemption. I cried for the man I had lost and the one he had finally become. I read the last line again and again. "I love you both beyond time. Forgive me if you can." I looked at Grace, her innocent face shining under the lamp, and I whispered, "You were my revenge, my miracle, my proof that life." When she smiled and asked if her dad was in heaven, I said, "Yes, darling, he's finally home." And for the first time in years, my heart felt light. As the wind touched the curtains, I felt him there somewhere between forgiveness and eternity. And I knew that this was not an ending. It was a beginning.